Straight ahead, on the ballot, early voting begins tomorrow, and you can vote to lower property taxes for homeowners and businesses. It's all part of 17 amendments to change the Texas Constitution. There are also bond measures and tax rate elections for local school districts. Expanding the field, State Representative Gina Hinojosa of Austin enters the Democratic primary for Texas governor. Her plan to defeat Governor Greg Abbott. And history made now that all 20 living Israeli hostages have been reunited with their families after being held by Hamas for 2 years. We asked members of Congress from North Texas how there can be a lasting peace in the Middle East. Good morning, I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas starts now. Hello and happy Sunday, and welcome to Eye on Politics. We begin with the statewide propositions on the ballot to change the Texas Constitution. Early voting begins tomorrow for the November 4th election, and there are 17 propositions in all. Many of them involve reducing property taxes. Among them, Proposition 13. If approved by voters, the homestead exemption will increase from $100,000 to $140,000 and take effect this year. This will impact 5.7 million Texas homeowners. Then there is Proposition 11, which will increase the homestead exemption for people over 65 and the disabled to $200,000. That will affect about 2 million seniors. Prop 9 will boost the tax exemption for businesses on their equipment and inventory from $2,500 to $125,000. Other constitutional amendments include property tax reductions for the surviving spouses of veterans, for owners whose homes are destroyed by fire, and for property owners whose land is used for border security infrastructure. We spoke with Republican State Senator Paul Bettencourt of Houston, who wrote a majority of the tax bills.
It has a 40% increase in the overall homestead exemption, which means it will save the average homeowner $484 a year. But wait, we're not done yet, because Prop 11 actually adds $60,000 more for over 65 and disabled homeowners for a $200,000 exemption, and that saves a whopping $907 per year for as long as they own their home as well. So these are big cuts.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, these are on top of the savings from before, right?
Right. These are all on top of the 2023's record property tax relief bill that cut property tax rates and for schools, and also increased the school exemption back then to $100,000. So we're doing even more now, and there's going to be some additional rate cuts as well that are all factored into the numbers that I gave you.
Now, you said before this is permanent, but undoubtedly, and this is only on the school property tax for homeowners, but undoubtedly you have people say, well, it feels like my property taxes are still going up. My property values are still going up. So what do you say to homeowners about that?
Well, the first thing I say is that the quickest way to a property tax cut is to vote for the propositions that raise your homestead exemptions, because they'll be with you the rest of your life. Whether you're under 65 or going over 65, it will just help you stay in your home. The whole concept of homestead exemptions has been championed by Lieutenant Governor Patrick, with many bills that we passed, about 8 of them, to help with housing affordability, because this is critical that we're trying to set the tone from the state for the school homestead exemptions, because really what has to happen is the cities and the counties have to follow along, and they have to make their own independent votes.
There are other propositions as far as veteran spouses, and also if people live along the border, and if their homes are destroyed by a fire. Can you walk us through those?
Right. There's about 11 propositions that deal with taxes in one way or the other, 10 specifically for property taxes. But yes, if you're fire damaged, because it takes now a year to rebuild now, it will give you the same break that areas and cities and counties get if there's a disaster, which means you can get a level playing, leveled out your value down so you don't pay on something that's been totaled effectively, which many cases for fires are there. If you've got borderland that's being used for the border wall, you can get a break on that.
And let me ask you about the business property tax exemption, because this is on a business's inventory and equipment. This is also going to increase the exemption.
And this was a priority of Speaker Burrows. It took us 4 sessions to get the exemption up to $2,500, and now we're blasting it up to $125,000. So when you think about it, an average business can buy a truck and then have computers and equipment for roughly that type of money. It means that they won't pay property taxes on it. That's about a $2,500 advantage for the taxpayers, but also saves them time because they don't have to waste a lot of time on filing paperwork at that point.
Other proposed amendments to the Constitution will ban taxes on capital gains, inheritance, and securities. There's also a new water infrastructure fund that will provide $1 billion each year for the next 20 years to develop new water sources for Texas and fix leaky pipes and wastewater systems. And another ballot proposition would force state judges to deny bail in certain felony cases, including murder, indecency with a child, and aggravated assault. A variety of school districts in North Texas are holding what's called voter-approved tax rate elections, or VATER, which by law are considered property tax increases. These districts include Carroll, HEB, Garland, Denton, Northwest, Bland, Rockwall, Crandall, and Peaster ISDs. Other school districts are holding bond elections. Coming up next, Democratic State Representative Gina Hinojosa of Austin enters the Texas governor's race. She tells us how she plans to win the primary and general election next year when Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Now to the expanding field in the Democratic primary for Texas governor. State Representative Gina Hinojosa entered the race last week. She joins Andrew White, who ran for governor back in 2018 and lost in the Democratic primary runoff. Hinojosa kicked off her campaign during a rally in her hometown of Brownsville last week. She's advocated for more state funding for public schools and was among the sharpest critics of the state's new school choice program that passed last year. We went one-on-one with Gina Hinojosa, and I asked her why she's running for governor and about the essence of her campaign.
Right now, we have a governor, Greg Abbott, who prioritizes the interests of really the corporate greed that is hurting Texans right now. Greg Abbott has been in office for over a decade, and Texans are struggling with higher costs for housing, higher costs for utility, and schools in crisis. So we need a governor who will work for the people of Texas and not for the well-connected, wealthy elite.
And before you get to a general election, you've still got to duke it out in the primary. You're going up against Andrew White. Why should Democratic primary voters select you over him?
Well, let me say it's going to take all of us to beat Greg Abbott, but I have a record that spans about a decade of working for the interests of working families, working Texans, and I will be running on that record, but I will be running for November. The stakes are so high, I have a responsibility to put all of my efforts into winning in November and not taking my eye off the prize. So that is my goal for this campaign.
You talked a little bit before about Governor Abbott. His campaign issued a statement yesterday, and I want to give you a chance to respond. He said Gina has proven that she is out of step with Texas. She sides with the defund the police movement, supports men competing in women's sports, backs harmful child modification procedures, embraces reckless open border policies, and opposes critical bail reform that keeps dangerous criminals behind bars. What do you say to that?
So that is such a tired attack on Democrats and on me in particular. Let me tell you what Greg Abbott does. He punches down at those with the least power. He distracts you with social issues with one hand while he takes your money with the other to give to his wealthy donor friends. And that is something that Texans are starting to see through. This is a governor who has a record of corruption like we've never seen in Texas before. Voters are starting to understand that. All I hear in this state is Texans want change, and I am the candidate for governor for change.
And so what are your top priorities if elected?
So obviously, neighborhood public schools have been a priority for me and will continue to be a priority to me. It's really pretty simple. We have to prioritize teacher pay. Our teachers right now are making $10,000 below the national average, when we all know the best thing we can do for our kids in the classroom is put a great teacher in that classroom. So that needs to be a priority. We need to scrap the vendor contracts that have gone out of control in this state under Greg Abbott and instead prioritize teachers and the classroom. Also, healthcare. Healthcare is out of reach for so many Texans. We could pull down federal funds to ensure 1 million Texans, that is money Texans have paid into the system, Greg Abbott refuses to accept, to provide life-saving healthcare for Texans. And when you look at, for instance, housing costs are out of control. Texans need real solutions for the housing crisis in Texas. We're one of the worst in the country when it comes to affordable housing. That needs to be a priority of the governor. That will be my priority.
Up next, members of Congress from North Texas have plenty to say about the history-making events in the Middle East. When Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas comes right back. Emotional and history-making family reunions in Israel. All 20 living Israeli hostages returned to their country after being held by Hamas for more than 2 years. Members of Congress from North Texas are reacting to what's happened since the first phase of the peace plan was signed. We spoke with Republican Craig Goldman of Fort Worth, who credits President Trump with a big win that he hopes will turn into a lasting peace.
Historic is a great word to use. It was extremely historic. So emotional watching it. I watched it all day. I started watching at 2 a.m. I didn't stop all day. Watching the families embrace their loved ones. I'm sure in the back of mind thinking that possibly they'd never see him again. And here they were after 2 years in captivity of being a hostage, seeing their loved ones again. It was truly emotional and absolutely fantastic to watch.
And what was the key to achieving this in your mind?
Well, in my mind, I think the key was one person, Donald Trump and his team, his negotiating team. When the many times that Bibi Netanyahu came to either America or Trump talked to him on the phone, it was, let's end this war and let's bring the hostages home. It was their negotiations that made this happen. There's no question in my mind.
And the key now, though, is it has to be a lasting peace.
No question.
So how do you achieve that?
Well, that's step one was to get the hostages home and end the war, right? So that's step one. Now step two comes to negotiations of what happens next, which was, if you watched yesterday, part of the historical another historical moment is when President Trump went to Egypt and met with all those foreign leaders of the region, of the Middle East, that's going to affect their lives as well and their countries as well. So they have to have input of what happens next there as well.
And one thing, though, is that there are still 24 remains of 24 hostages who didn't survive, who were killed by Hamas, have not been returned yet. How does the United States ensure that Hamas lives up to that part of the agreement and returns the remains?
Well, again, that was part of the deal, and just heartbreaking to know that there are up to 30 former hostages who are no longer living that are still in Gaza. And part of the problem, as they said, is They need to find them first. They don't really know where they all are. So right, we keep the pedal on the metal and make sure that all those hostages and their remains are returned back to Israel.
So let's talk about the government shutdown. Is there any end in sight, and what do you think it's going to take to end it?
The end in sight is Chuck Schumer saying, okay, I'll vote for the continuing resolution. That's it. It's very simple. The Republicans in the U.S. Congress, in the House, made that vote. What's it going on, 2 weeks and change now, where we took that vote to keep the government open, and the Democrats in the Senate refused to do it. They need 60 votes in the Senate. They have 53. So we need Chuck Schumer to end the Schumer shutdown, take the vote to keep the government open, or now reopen the government, and get the troops paid, and have low-income families get paid, because there's no reason to have this shutdown right now, zero.
So, while the Republicans are blaming the Democrats are blaming the Republicans, saying, look, they control the White House, they control the House, they control the Senate.
And we've all voted to keep the government open. It's Chuck Schumer that has forbid his members and himself from voting to keep the government open.
We also spoke with Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch about the return of Israeli hostages and what comes next.
Oh, I'm just so happy. I'm so happy for those families. The anguish that they must have been going through over these last 2 years, I can't even comprehend it. If my son had been, either one of my sons were missing from me for that long. So I'm just really happy for those families. Hopefully they can start the process of healing and moving forward. But I'm very happy for them.
What do you think was the key to achieve this? Obviously, this was a long time coming.
Well, I think there's several factors at play. A 2-year war takes a significant toll on everyone involved. Obviously, the Israeli military had done significant damage in Gaza and to Hamas. And I think the people of Gaza were suffering mightily. And so at some point it has to end. And I think there's also a lot of world pressure being put to bear on Netanyahu and the Israeli government. Trump certainly had a role in that, but other countries, Qatar and Egypt and others did as well.
Do you think that the pressure was also put on Hamas, especially from these other countries in the Middle East, these other Arab countries in the Middle East?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was. I think there's pressure to bear on all sides. And obviously that pressure finally moved the needle. I think there have been a lot of efforts to try to bring this war to an end over these last 2 years. And finally, we finally got to a point where it was achievable. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts going forward. How's, Gaza going to govern itself? Who's going to take over the leadership of the Palestinian people and their government?
We've seen a lot of Republicans obviously praise President Trump, and even some Democrats, former First Lady and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton among them. So what do you say about that?
I think it's great. He obviously had a role in achieving this outcome, and we need to give credit where credit is due. I think that's one of the differences between Democrats and Republicans. I can give credit to a Republican when they do something well and they achieve a good result. Republicans are unable and have been unable to ever give credit to a Democrat when they've achieved good results.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the ongoing government shutdown. What do you think it's going to take at this point for the government to reopen?
It's going to take Republicans to recognize that Americans need their health care and they're not going to easily walk away from it. Millions of Americans are going to lose their health care coverage. Notice letters are starting to go out. 6 states have received notice letters. They went out in Georgia already. And as a result, you could already see Marjorie Taylor Greene is going, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. This is affecting my kid. This is affecting my constituents. And she's starting to voice her concerns about what's happening. Texas notice letters will go out November 1st. So I think what we're going to see is Texas is the largest state that participates in the Affordable Care Act. Every congressional member of the Texas delegation has constituents that benefit and get their health care coverage from this program. And I'm sure that their phones are going to start reading off the wall when people start getting their notice letters and realizing that their premiums could go from $7,000 to $23,000, up hundreds of percent, doubling and quadrupling for their health care coverage. And it's unacceptable in our state.
A new policy at the U.S. Defense Department is attracting a lot of controversy. News organizations say they are not going to go along with it. Sarah Jenkins explains what's at stake in the brief.
CBS News is one of many media organizations, including Newsmax, The New York Times, and Fox News, where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was previously an on-air host, that say they will not sign the new Pentagon restrictions. The networks released a joint statement saying, quote, "Today we join virtually every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which would restrict journalists' abilities to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principle of a free and independent press." Hegseth said that outlets who don't agree to the new rules, which restrict reporting on news not specifically approved by his team, will be evicted from the Pentagon. For The Brief, I'm Sarah Jenkins.
And you can watch all our full interviews from today's show on our CBS Texas YouTube page. Please hit the subscribe button while you're there. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. I'll see you again next week, and from all of us, have a great Sunday.